coming at you, encouraging you to motivate your mind, build your body, and search your soul. This is Grit for Life podcast, and I am your host, Nate Parks, continuing our series on heroes, going along with our workshop, Grit for Life workshop. We have come to our fourth week, in which we deal with the soul portion, the searching your soul, and the importance of it. In our last podcast, talked about the importance of self-reflection, and we wanted to just kind of start building upon that with this podcast and talk about, you know what, in reality, I guess the best way we could probably even title this would be the sound of silence. The sound of silence is something that we so many times find ourselves very uncomfortable with. And we talk about in Grit for Life, and if you've listened to anything motivational, you know that there is a quote that talks about becoming comfortable with the uncomfortable. And there is no better spot for that saying than when we talk about self-reflection and understanding the importance of the sound of silence. When we just allow ourselves to sit in silence, allow ourselves to just be still, there is power in that, but there's fear as well. You see, we want to disguise the pain that we feel. We want to disguise our feelings of inadequacy with noise from around us, whether it be going out on the weekend and making sure that we fill our weekend as much as possible with partying and going to bars, or being extremely active to the point where we don't have to just stop and think. We get in our cars and we blare the music, or we'll go and we'll play video games, and there's just this constant noise. And noise can be interpreted in many different ways. Noise can be literally that, noise, or noise can be the things that we fill our life with that keeps us from being still with ourselves. But the thing about it is, when we are not still with ourselves, we never come to a point of reviewing our actions. And if we don't review our actions, then we don't take responsibility for our actions. And if you know anything about Grit for Life, we talk about that. Before you can take responsibility for your success, you must also take responsibility for your shortcomings. But we don't want to do that. That's uncomfortable. That is something that many times we fear. And when we talk about searching our soul, learning to embrace the sound of silence is so important. In the military, we have different things that we have these, review performance evals that, and I know many times even in corporations and things like that, you have times where you set aside to evaluate your progress or evaluate what you're bringing to the company. In the military also, we have what's called after action review. And that's the time where after a mission, everybody gets together, or after training or after something big, everyone gets together and does a review on what went right, what went wrong, what can we do better next time if we have faced the same difficulties and same battles and same struggles. And these are so important because it shows us where we need to plan for the future. Because if we don't do that, then what happens is we are apt to actually repeat our mistakes from the last time. And learning to embrace the sound of silence and sitting with yourself and learning to meditate and dwell just on being. This is kind of a way of doing an after actions report with our own personal life. And how do we expect to progress? How can we expect to be successful? How can we expect to move forward out of where we are at right now and not repeat our mistakes if we don't take time to actually review what we did right and what we did wrong? And they both go hand in hand. We live in a society that doesn't want to talk about what we did wrong. We want to feel good. We live in a very feel-good society. Everything is about feel good and using words that make us feel good. But that never gets us anywhere if we cannot admit that we are not where we need to be. If I sit there and tell you, we are on TikTok. If you want to follow us, we're at Grit Nation on TikTok. And I just did a TikTok video today talking about if you surround yourself with people who just try to tell you that you're okay, Those are the people that you need to get out of your life. And the same with our own life is if we don't want to tell ourselves, we don't want to look in the mirror and say, man, you need a change. That didn't work. We want to tell ourselves, you're okay. It's somebody else's fault. You're okay. You'll make it next time. But we don't put into action. We don't actually sit there and say, okay, that was a mistake. Now I want to learn from it. And how do I change it forward? And we do this by learning to just sit and be still and search our soul. You say, well, okay, I get that. I hear you. I kind of can see the importance of it, but how do I do that? This was something that was very hard for me because when you began to actually start moving it to embrace the sound of silence, it does become very uncomfortable. And in my own life, it really became a struggle. I was okay with changing my mind. I was okay with going to the gym and building my body. But when it came to searching my soul, I didn't really want to. Because in the silence are my demons. You know, I think it's Imagine Dragons that has that song Demons. And that if you've listened to the words of that song, the lyrics of that song speaks to me because it is so true, talking about look into my eyes because that is where my demons are. And even as someone who motivates people, someone who seeks to help people be a better version of themselves, I have many times in my life I don't want to face the silence. I don't want to face my demons. And yet, in order for me to beat yesterday's you with today's you, in order for me to be my version of yesterday with my today's version of me, I have to be willing to sit in the silence. How do we do that? First of all, we have to recognize the importance of it. Obviously, we have to say, okay. And then second of all, we have to set time aside to say, okay, I'm going to take some time out Friday, or I'm going to take some time out this weekend. And when I say sit in silence, I don't necessarily mean you got to go find a dark room that has cushions around it and has total silence. What I mean is take yourself out of the distractions that keeps you from focusing. For me, sometimes it is shutting myself in a room. For me, sometimes it is finding a place that I can just be. I've literally found my time sometimes where I've literally gone into my closet and just shut the door and sat and allowed myself to just be. Other times it might just be me going out on a hike or going out into nature and finding a place alone by a stream and allowing the gentleness of the stream. You say, well, that's not silence, Nate. It is in essence because it's a calming part of my soul and it allows me to begin to reflect. Whatever it may be, but it's taking the distractions. When I say the sound of silence, I mean remove the distractions from your life. So you have to acknowledge that it is important and you have to do it. You have to set time out to do it until it becomes a habit. It has become such a habit for me now that now I can do it almost anywhere. Anytime that I get a moment where there's no real distraction, there's no silence, I just say, okay, hey, I've got this moment. And it doesn't have to be long. It has to be a moment where you can reflect. And when it becomes a habit, it doesn't have to be as long each time. I've been doing it for a while that I'm able to sit there and learn to find those moments. And then I can just stop and reflect on the last day or the last couple of days. But the point of it is finding that time. And then don't take the whole picture. Don't expect to reflect over your whole life in an hour of silence. No. What you're doing then is creating an impossible task, because then what's going to happen is you're going to review all over your life. You're going to see everything come at you at once. You don't know how to handle that. You're not going to be able to fix everything right away. And so what you've done is you've set yourself up for failure. You've set yourself up to be defeated again. No, instead you say, okay, I have this time I set aside. I'm sitting by a stream, so I understand the importance. I set the time, I kept the time, and now I'm here. What do I do? This is where it becomes important to figure out where you want to go and what you need to work on to get there. For example, maybe it's something you're doing at work, and maybe you say, you know what, maybe it's not actually something really big and dark. It's just simple as I want to be a better producer at work. I want to do better at work. I want to be able to produce better. I want to be a better employee, and I want to be able to be a better asset for my company. And so you just take that time out and say, okay, let's break this down in chunks. What did I do last week? That was the after actions review. What did I do last week that was good? Man, I did this. I made some calls that really were able to be productive. I didn't really waste time. I was able to be of value to my coworkers. Okay, those are great things. So that's the good stuff. So what could you do better? Well, I did have a couple of days where my response is my responsibility, and I didn't control my response in something, and I became angry, and it really ruined my whole day. And those moments are going to come. So what I need to do, I can do better at that. So the next time something like that comes, what I can do is respond better. And that will make me a better worker throughout the whole day. And it won't destroy my whole day. I won't lose a whole day of productivity. Or maybe it's, you know what, I really struggle getting up in the morning. I hit the snooze button a lot, and it made me rush into work, and it just started my day off wrong. And so as I'm reflecting over that, I understand what I can start doing is making sure that I don't hit the snooze button. I make a commitment that I'm not going to hit the snooze button. I'm going to get up. I'm going to have a proper breakfast. I'm going to get a cup of coffee or something to get me going. And guess what? I am going to take a time to breathe before I get into the vehicle, before I get to work, so that by the time I get to work, my mindset is where it needs to be a better, productive employee. It's as simple, but yet we don't do it. We just we talked about last podcast about putting ourselves on autopilot. We just do it. We don't even think about it. Before you get up, you hit snooze a few times, you rush through the drive-thru and get a crappy breakfast that isn't healthy for you. Your mind isn't where it needs to be. You get to work, somebody comes at you and you blow up and your day's ruined and you're on autopilot. You didn't stop. So during that moment of silence, you can stop and reflect. But then maybe it also is pursuing your dream, and maybe there are some obstacles from your past that you haven't let go. Maybe there's someone that you haven't forgiven. Maybe that someone is you. And maybe it is that big that when you have that moment of silence, you say, okay, today, right now, I can't resolve everything in my life. But I have this 30 minutes where I'm sitting here by the stream, or I have this 15 minutes where I'm sitting inside a closet or my bathroom or something, and I've taken away the distractions so that I can start digging deeper into my soul. And what do I want to look at today? So again, you've understood the importance, you've set the time aside, you start reviewing what you need to review, and you set a goal. That goal is, all right, I have this person who I've not forgiven and it eats at me. It doesn't eat at me all the time. I mean, it does, but I don't realize it. But when it does come up, when someone says something or brings that name up, or I see a picture of that person on social media, or that person calls when I don't want to talk to them, it reminds me I haven't forgiven them, and it eats at me, and it is a hindrance, and it is an obstacle that I have to let go. Okay, so let's look at what are the positive things. What have you done? Well, I have removed myself from that situation. That's a positive. So again, you're reflecting, you're soul searching. I have ensured that person doesn't really physically have any control over me each and every day. Fantastic. Now you've identified a positive. So in that moment of silence, in the sound of silence, let's take a look and ask yourself, what is that you can do better? How can you forgive? Do you understand the importance of forgiving? Maybe it's sometime this week, you're going to look up some articles on the internet, or you're going to read a book, or you're going to listen to a podcast, or you're going to listen to some motivational video on YouTube about forgiveness. And understand that when we forgive somebody, it isn't necessarily to benefit them. It is to help us let go so it no longer is a burden that we're dragging from the past, carrying it in the present, and propelling it into the future. And so then that self-reflection time comes, and you can sit there and say, okay, this is what I'm going to work on. I am going to try to forgive that person. I'm going to start working on forgiving, because forgiveness can be a process. I am not one of these people that believes you can just walk up one day and say, hey, by the way, I forgive you. Or you write a letter, I forgive you. Or maybe you don't want to talk to them at all and you just write a letter that you're never going to give, but in your heart you forgive them. It doesn't happen overnight many times. The pain is so deep, so hard, that it comes to a point where we cannot just do it overnight. So self-reflection becomes, all right, what can I do this week? So again, setting those short-term goals, those short victories. So this week, I'm going to start working on a letter. I'm going to write out my thoughts. And maybe I am going to talk to them, but I'm going to first start writing it out. I'm going to write it out. This is what you did, and this is how it made me feel, but I no longer want you to have power and control over me, so I am learning to forgive you. Okay, so then the next time you're going to say, okay, I did that this week. Next week, I'm going to set up a time of self-reflection, or tomorrow I'm going to set up a time of self-reflection, and I am going to revisit this. So the next day, you come back and you have that moment of reflection. You understand the importance. You set it up. You set an agenda, and now you're taking a look. The positive things. Yesterday, I wrote a letter. Yesterday, I wrote all of this out. That's great. Now what do I need to work on? Well, what I need to work on is taking the next step. Do I send a letter? Do I talk to the person to face? Do I make a phone call? Or do I just write out my forgiveness to me, burn it, and let it go? That is the importance of the sound of silence. The sound of silence allows us to understand our strengths and our shortcomings. It allows us to positively enforce ourselves and our soul on the things that we've done right, and then glaring in the mirror, look at the things we're not doing right so that we can change, so that we are not stuck in a continual cycle of self-destruction and sitting right where we are at. That's uncomfortable. I get it. I know. But when we can understand the value and the importance of it, it will become a piece of the puzzle of freedom that will set you free. And it's that way when it comes to really anything. You have a goal. Maybe one day, years ago, or maybe today, I don't know, you had a dream. You had a vision. When I got Grit for Life started 4 years ago, I had a vision. I had a purpose, and I had a passion for helping people to motivate their mind, build their body, search their soul, and begin to build a better version of themselves. A version and be able to reach their purpose. And I set out doing it thinking that it was going to be so easy and that everyone was going to gravitate to it and everyone was going to want to listen and everyone was going to jump on board and go, oh my God, this is awesome. And it did not happen that way. In fact, it didn't happen that way for years. And what it came in my life is I had to say, I began to be defeated. I began to be discouraged. And I had to take the time out in silence. And that was uncomfortable because I had to be real with myself. I had to ask myself in my moments of silence, say, okay, what have you done good? What was good? And what can you do better? What are the things you're self-destructing on? Well, as soon as people didn't jump on board the way I thought they would, I started doubting myself. Okay, why did you doubt yourself? Well, no one listened. No one really paid attention. People were leaving Grit for Life faster than they were coming into Grit for Life. Okay, was that a reflection on you? Or was it a reflection on them? If it was a reflection on you, then what is it that you had control of? Again, learning to control what we can control and forget and let go of the things that we can't. And it took me a while to begin to find the pieces that worked and not give up. But I had to remove the distractions, and I had to embrace the sound of silence. No, this podcast hasn't stopped. I just was silent for a moment. In this silence right now, are you getting the urge to turn this podcast off? Are you becoming uneasy? Why? Again, it's because the truth is starting to dig its roots inside of you, and you don't like the silence because you haven't learned the importance of it. And that's where I'm saying it will become uncomfortable. But when we can embrace the uncomfortable and become comfortable with the uncomfortable, our doors of our future and our success and a better version of us will grow. So I challenge you today, start understanding the importance of the sound of silence. Start embracing it. Set time aside to self-reflect and create that moment of silence, removing distractions. And you know those distractions. You know what you try to fill your life with. And then activate a plan. Take it in small chunks. Don't attempt to take on the world all at one time, because small victories are still victories. And a series of small victories will lead you to a bigger success.